There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
Confirmation the coronavirus has reached Australia.
Why did Australia not follow the dedicated pandemic plan that they had in place?
I think I did not anticipate the crowd formation, the herd mentality that hijacked people's minds during this time, starting in around April 2020.
For many, 2020 will be the toughest year of our lives.
Most people in Australia stopped being able to actually reckon with data, to use their minds, to engage with information and think about it for themselves. They were so afraid of COVID that they had become vulnerable to being captured by this crowd mentality. And we have seen crowds in the past. We've seen highly destructive crowds, like in the 1930s in Germany or in the witch hunts in my country of birth. There are times when whole societies can be just caught up in one obsession, and everything else that's usually important in normal times just gets pushed aside.
A staggering number of Victorians have picked up the phone to dob in their neighbours at the height of the lockdown.
Out of this great fear and this great emotive, shared emotive content. And it gives people a great sense of security and kind of fellowship to be in this crowd, but their brains then become merely an instrument of the crowd. So people started to simply justify and rationalize what the crowd was spewing out, which was the mainstream narrative on the television.
Mandating vaccines is a very sensible approach.
Unvaccinated loved ones and whether you should spend time with them.
And you would give them information, actual facts, like the danger of COVID from Worldometer or, Our World in Data or whatever. You say, look, it's not really killing many kids. Maybe we don't need to vaccinate the kids. And there was an inability to process that information because the brain was no longer actually working as an information processing organism. It was working as a rationalization machine for what the crowd wanted you to follow and to believe at that time. Very Orwellian. By always focusing on the things you had to do to protect yourself, the government's messaging encouraged a kind of siege mentality in people, rather than talking about, make sure that you get enough sleep and water and good nutrition and sunlight for vitamin D, and make sure you've got high enough zinc levels. And if you're elderly, make sure that you have good ventilation and right. There was none of that, zero, right? So no actually early treatment or preparation to make sure that our best defense against COVID, which is our immune system, was in the best possible shape. And so again, if the health department had actually wanted to save lives and save human suffering, then they would have emphasized those things, because those things have been known since the germ theory of disease to be effective against various kinds of infectious agents, right? But we heard none of it. And so instead we were constantly told about, well, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? Against what was implicitly then portrayed as this hideous, almost just incredibly powerful agent that we had to constantly be on alert about. So we had this elevated cortisol level, and we were all just encouraged to stay constantly in a state of anxiety. That is also going to depress our immune systems, right? As well as being home under lockdown and having to share air with everybody in the house and not getting enough exercise and all the other stuff, right? So basically, there was no emphasis on our actual strength against this virus, and everything was almost in worship of the power of the virus. And that was partially because, again, the politicians had painted themselves as saviors. They had to make sure that the thing they were saving us from was sufficiently fearsome.
I had the experience myself of two highly respected friends of mine, highly educated, very intelligent. And I said to them, human rights, you too have stood for it all of your lives. They said, this isn't a human rights issue or a libertarian issue, Russell, this is a health issue.
People, it was almost like they forgot that health reasons and emergency, crises invented by governments are a normal way of governments reaching beyond their remit and abusing their citizens. If you look in history, that's what happens. I mean, the persecution of the Jews in World War II was often justified using this notion of, we have to cleanse, we have to get rid of the dirty, we have to, there's the unwashed and then clean.
I wouldn't want to be in the room with lots of people who aren't vaccinated.
You want to know that the people sitting alongside you, breathing in the same air as you, have also been vaccinated.
The same kind of divisive rhetoric was used. Health. If anything, I saw a reverse correlation between education and sense during this time, because the people who were most educated were also those most exposed to these narratives that were constantly blaring out of authority figures' mouths. And those who were not so educated, maybe way out in the bush somewhere, maybe weren't watching TV quite as much, They weren't in circles where everybody else was blaring on about all these supposed dangers. So I think they were just a little more immune, and they were also more in touch with real risks because they may have had, for example, blue collar jobs where you actually have to take physical risks, right? Unlike a lot of the people making these policies and a lot of the people in the intelligentsia who were sitting around zooming in on their laptops and sipping a latte from home, you know. I mean, it was nuts. I mean, this has shown me how much work we have to do to restore Australia as a happy, healthy, wealthy, strong country. We really need to do a lot of work, and it's going to take years.